Sitting in today for our chair, Robert Lilligren. It is Monday, December 16th, 2024. Before I call the meeting to order, I'd like to say a few things about how we'll conduct this meeting. And before I get to that, I just want to note that our neighboring capital city to the east is going through great trauma this afternoon, and just wanted to think about the families and first responders, hospital staffs, school faculty, everyone in Madison, Wisconsin who's dealing with the horrible tragedy there. It's been a very rough day for that community. And with that, the first item is our agenda. Members can see the posted agenda online. Before asking for approval of the agenda, I'd like to propose an amendment to the agenda. The first item under information, the continued land use policy discussion, was one that we had asked staff to bring back for discussion, as we did not have our full committee membership at the last meeting's discussion. And in that, we don't have our full committee membership here tonight. And in that, I think we really need a full, robust discussion. I would propose that we amend the agenda to move this item to our next meeting and remove it from today's agenda. So is there someone willing to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Councilmember Carter moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Chambliss seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. The second item on the agenda is the approval of our December 2nd regular committee meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Councilmember Wolf moves approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Chambliss seconds. Any discussion, additions, deletions, amendments? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. As an administrator of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Housing Choice Voucher Program, the Met Council's Housing and Redevelopment Authority is required to prepare and submit a 5-year and annual public housing agency plan. I will now, let's see, now where did I? Sorry. I've got all sorts of notes here, and there have been amendments to the notes, and it doesn't take much to get Sue confused, so here we go. The plan serves as a guide to the Metro HRA programs, policies, operations, and strategies for serving the needs of very low and extremely low-income households. The plan is intended to be a convenient source of information for program participants, the federal government, and the communities of the region. The administrative plan, the HRA's main policy document, is an attachment to the plan. The 5-year plan for the years 2025 to 2029 was approved by the Metropolitan Council on September 25th, 2024, and submitted to the U.S. Department of HUD. The subject of today's public hearing is the annual PHA plan. I will now open this public hearing. We welcome public comment. We do not have anyone pre-registered. Is there anyone else here this evening who would like to speak? Seeing no one, I will now close the public hearing and thank everybody for attending. For those who still would like to comment, the good news is you have until 4:30 on December 20th, which is this Friday. As a reminder to comment on the Public Housing Agency annual plan, members of the public who are listening may still provide public comment in the following ways. You may write the council at 390 Robert Street North, St. Paul, Minnesota, 55101. You may fax 651-602-1313. You may email the council at Terry, Terrri, .smith@metc.state.mn.us, or you may record a comment on the public comment line at 651-602-1500, or on the TTY line at 651-291-0904. At the close of the public comment process, staff will prepare a summary of public comments. The Metropolitan Council will have an opportunity to review any comments prior to taking action on the PHA plan. We will now resume our regular agenda, and we will move on to the consent agenda. We have 2 items listed under the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Councilmember Lindstrom moves. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a chorus of seconds from Councilmember Carter and Councilmember Lee. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion carried. We've approved those two items. We'll move on to the non-consent agenda. The first item on the non-consent agenda item is 2024-346, funding recommendations for 2024 Round 2 Tax Base Revitalization Account grants with Marcus Martin. Welcome, Marcus.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. It looks like maybe we would need to change the presentation there on the screen.
Oh, he went right to the fund distribution plan. Can you let him know that? Greg, we need non-consent item number 1, 2024-346, funding recommendations for 2024 Round 2 Tax Base Revitalization. There we go. Thank you, Greg.
All right, wonderful. Well, that,
And if this meeting goes as late as the last one, Greg, would you please order pizza so that we can watch it during the football game afterwards? Never mind. Go ahead, Marcus, I'm sorry.
all right. Well, maybe I'll just start here while we're waiting for the slides. I'm Marcus Martin. I'm a senior planner in the Livable Communities Unit, and I appreciate you putting this item on the business item on the agenda today. I'll be presenting round 2 of the tax-based revitalization account grant recommendations. You all are very familiar with the program, but I'll do a little bit of background for the listening audience. All of our LCA grant programs share some goals, including creating more housing choices throughout the region, supporting the growth of living wage jobs, improving connections where people live and work, and regional amenities like parks, and support for more equitable development outcomes. We have 77 participants, cities that participate in the program. Participation is voluntary. The applicants are cities, counties, development authorities, each of which who partner with developers on individual projects. The projects, if you could see the screen, I would have a little map with yellow areas shown on there, and you would see that those are the cities that are eligible to apply. And hopefully we'll get that up here soon. There are 4 active programs in the Livable Communities account. I will go through the acronyms, but Livable Communities Demonstration Account, LCDA, the Transit-Oriented Development Account, TOD, and the Local Housing Incentives Account, LHIA, and Tax-Based Revitalization Account, TBRA, which is the focus of today. And that is for projects that support redevelopment on properties with environmental contamination. We are pleased that together we can support LCA programs, provide financial support for incentives across the stages of development. The TBRA program offers grant categories that help with planning and design, as well as environmental remediation before starting construction. So I'll turn now to the funding availability. In March, the council approved up to $5.5 million. All right, we'll go through here as we go. Thank you. There's that map. All right. Thank you for your patience, and thank you to Greg. In March, the council approved up to $5.5 million to be awarded in 2 funding cycles. Applications were due in May and in November. We have 3 types of TBRA grants: investigation grants, cleanup grants, and what we call Seeding Equitable Environmental Development, or SEED grants. All right. The evaluation for each application focuses on what are the expected outcomes for TBRA. These are things like increases to the tax base, adding affordable housing or living wage jobs, and the relative risks posed by the contaminants. We also look at how thoroughly the project has conducted its community engagement and the representation and qualifications of the development team, as well as the readiness and feasibility of the projects to proceed with it. So now we can turn to this funding cycle. We received 6 applications this cycle, 1 investigation application from South St. Paul, 1 seed application from Minneapolis, and 4 contamination cleanup applications from Medina, Minneapolis, and St. Paul. There was a total of 2.5 million requested. There are some funding limits. The state statute limits the amount of funding that can be awarded to projects in a single city up to 50%, and in Minneapolis and St. Paul up to 75%. However, since the grant program was undersubscribed in this cycle, we did not apply the funding limits in this cycle. We can look now at the individual recommendations. Okay. Starting with investigation. We are recommending funding for 1 investigation application from South St. Paul, Wakota Crossing, in the amount of $44,400 to help assess the feasibility of a future industrial development. As I mentioned earlier, we also have that seed application. So we are recommending funding over the original request amount to make up for an expected shortfall from our funding partners for the 2211 Broadway Street Northeast project in the amount of $251,600. This would be to support a multi-tenant project reusing a former industrial building. And next we'll look at the cleanup applications, recommendations rather. We are recommending 3 cleanup requests for funding. Funding is recommended for 42 Water Street in the amount of $364,200, Cheatham Apartments in the amount of $1,326,500, and Rise Up Center in the amount of $274,500. There was 1 application that did not meet our required minimum score to be recommended for funding. All right. Here are some images of what those recommended projects would look like, or could look like, I should say, once they are built. So if you're looking clockwise from the upper left, that is the Cheatham Apartments, a mixed income apartment buildings, 2 of them, surrounding a head house, a reuse of a former grain silo. There is the Rise Up Center, a multi-tenant facility surrounded or focused basically on workforce development and adaptive reuse of a building for, I would say, commercial building for recreational use at 42 Water Street. All right, let's turn back to the project that was not recommended. One of the cleanup applications did not have a competitive score. The proposed project in Medina received a low score because it did not have any affordable units. It projected very few jobs on site and had a lower relative risk based on the small amount of contaminated soil found at the site. Most of the soil issues appeared to be related to structural needs rather than removing contamination. In closing, the recommendation to this committee is that the Metropolitan Council award 5 tax-based revitalization account grants totaling $2,261,200 as shown in Table 1 in the business item, and authorize its Executive Director of Community Development to execute the grants on behalf of the council. Thank you.
Comments and questions? Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For 2 of the cleanup applications, we list the amount recommended as being higher than the amount requested. How did that happen?
Councilmember Wolf, members of the committee, yes, that's correct. This is similar to the example with the seed application. There was an anticipated funding shortfall for both of those projects when we take into account the other funding partners. In this case, these are county and the state for each of these. So we are recommending more funding than they requested to make it whole.
Councilmember Wolf?
I've never seen that before. Is that something that's within our rules to just give them more than they ask for?
We, Councilmember Wolf, members of the committee, we have done this on occasion. You're correct that it is a rarity. Usually we have a situation where either we are not aligned in the projects that we would recommend for funding, or that funding is expected to be there in place. So the intent is really to maximize the pool of projects that came into all of the funders at this time.
Councilmember Wolf, oh, okay.
I've got nothing.
Councilmember Chambliss?
Thank you, Chair. For the SEED award for the city of Minneapolis, I am not seeing the description of the,
If I might.
what that building is going to be used for.
Yes, members of the committee.
I might have missed that in your
Yes,
presentation.
thank you for pointing that out. For the seed category, it is a category that is a little bit more open than the other categories. We allow applicants to either apply for a site that they know and a project concept, or one that is further along. And so because of that bigger range of outcomes, we are really focused more on the potential and the cleanup itself than on the deliverables on the seed sites.
Yes, Councilmember.
Thank you. And would we get an update when a decision is made on the use of that facility?
Members of the committee, yes, Councilmember, I can share with you that the intent for that facility is to have, it's a multi-tenant facility. Part of that is intended to be a mosque, restaurant spaces, office spaces, all for rent in addition. So that is it's a very community-focused project.
Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thanks. If memory serves, we made a change in 2024 to allow scattered site investigation. Did it? And you may have covered this. Then no one took us up on that this time around. And I'm just curious. That was a new change for 2024. Is that working out as planned?
Yes, Chair, council members, it's not working out quite as planned. You're correct that they didn't take us up on that offer to do a scattered site. I have heard occasional interest, but it hasn't turned into an actual proposal.
It's okay. We tried.
Yeah.
I'm okay with trying things, and if they don't work, they don't work.
They don't work. Sometimes they don't.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing no further question or comment, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
Councilmember Chambliss moved. Is there a second? Councilmember Lee seconds. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Marcus. Next, we have 2024-347 funding recommendations for 2024 LHIA multifamily grants with Hannah Gary. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you, Chair, committee members. Good afternoon. I am Hannah Gary. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a planning analyst in community development. And today I'll be presenting the funding recommendations for the 2024 Local Housing Incentives Account, or LHIA program. And I also want to acknowledge all of the work that my former colleague Ashley Johnson did on this program before leaving the council, as well as all of the work from our funding partners at Minnesota Housing. So LHIA specifically supports the production and preservation of affordable housing in the region. The production of new affordable housing helps cities to meet their negotiated and life cycle housing goals. This year, the council approved $2.5 million in funding for LHIA through adopting the 2024 LCA Fund Distribution Plan. In LHIA, each city is required to provide a 100% local match to each award that is given from the council. Unlike the other LCA programs, LHIA applications do not come directly to the council. LHIA applications are part of the consolidated RFP run by Minnesota Housing. When they apply, project teams note if they're interested in being considered for LHIA. The staff at Minnesota Housing then send us a list of interested applications, and we rank them against our competitive criteria. Minnesota Housing assesses finances and need for each project and lets us know which projects are best supported with additional LHIA funds. All projects have to have affordable housing and a fair housing marketing plan to be considered for LHIA. The city must also have an adopted fair housing policy. Once applications are considered eligible, we score them against our competitive criteria. Projects that have deeply affordable units or units that are serving residents making below 30% of the area median income, that have larger units, are bringing a new housing type to the area, or are specifically supporting residents experiencing homelessness will receive higher scores. The scoring process through both the council and Minnesota Housing has yielded this recommendation before you today. The recommendation is for the council to award 4 LHIA grants totaling $2.5 million and to authorize the executive director of community development to execute the grant agreements on behalf of the council. And here you have a list of the 4 projects that are being recommended for funding. The funding amounts are recommended to us by Minnesota Housing. And I'll now give a brief overview of the projects that are being recommended for funding. So in the city of Medina, Melrose Commons will bring 50 new affordable units. 8 of the units will be set aside for people with disabilities, and another 7 will be reserved for high-priority homeless residents. Staff are recommending funding this project at $450,000. And I want to note on this project, we received an update this morning from the city about their local match, and $260,000 of their local match will be coming from the city, and a remaining $190,000 will be covered by Hennepin County Home Funds, and this will be reflected in the committee report, but just a note that there's a discrepancy there in the business item that you have before you. The next project that we're recommending for funding is Penn Station in Richfield, which will bring 42 new units of affordable housing with 15 units designated as supportive housing. 6 are reserved for people with disabilities, and 7 are set aside for high-priority homeless residents. And staff are recommending funding this project at $850,000. In the city of Bloomington, we have Southview Estates, which is preserving an existing 37 units of affordable housing and adding affordability restrictions to another 10 units for a total of 47 affordable units. The project includes 19 3-bedroom units that will serve families. Staff are recommending funding the project at $700,000. And finally, the last award is from the city of Minneapolis. The Warren will bring 60 new units of affordable housing. Of those 60, 8 are reserved for high-priority homeless, and 7 are set aside for people with disabilities. Staff are recommending funding this project at $500,000. And once again, the funding recommendation before you today is to award 4 LHIA grants totaling $2.5 million and to authorize the executive director of community development to execute the grant agreement on behalf of the council. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions or comments? Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's Medina, not Medina.
Thank you. I am from Georgia, and the pronunciation is always different, and every time in my head, I think I'm saying it the wrong way, so thank you. I appreciate that.
And then there are the people who would talk about Wayzata or, you know. We're a state full of tough-to-pronounce communities. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any particular comments about these projects. They all look like good projects. I would just note that in a time when we're really struggling to have enough affordable housing, we get more units when we do it multifamily than when we're doing these individual home ownership projects. I mean, look, we spent almost twice that much money on home ownership projects for a lot fewer units.
Other comments or questions? Councilmember?
They all look
Lindstrom?
like great projects to me as well, and I just especially wanted to give a shout out to Melrose Commons. Just the fact that it's 50 units, really on the edge of our region, is it's just great to see.
Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to maybe have you expand on what falls into the realm of supportive housing.
That is an excellent question, and I may need to lean on Lisa or Sarah a bit to answer that question. I'm filling in LHIA here at the very end, but with supportive housing, we're looking at developments that have some kind of service included. A lot of what we see would be like workforce training. There are social workers that are working at the development. So usually when we have those deeper affordability units or folks who are in that high priority homeless units, there are supportive services that are included with the development.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Hearing no further comment or question, is there a motion to approve?
Move approval?
Wolf moves approval. Is there a second?
Second?
Lee seconds. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. I think we're going to make it in plenty of time for our football game, so at least I am. Our next item is an information item, Livable Communities Act 2025 Fund Distribution Plan, highlights of proposed program changes. Sarah Bierke, welcome, and Hannah Gary, welcome back.
Yeah, they changed it at the beginning. All right. Hello, council members. Thanks, Chair Vento. I'm Sarah Berkey. I'm the Senior Manager for Housing and Livable Communities, and you know my colleague Hannah Gary, who is just here, our planning analyst. So we're going to talk today about the path between all the conversations we've had about LCA throughout 2024 and the plan for operating that program in 2025, and then looking forward to 2026 as well. To remind you all of where we've been this year, because I can't believe how many steps along the way we've had until you really look at it laid out like this. After the approval of last year's fund distribution plan in February, we discussed hiring a set of consultants to help us work through some questions about LCA and provide more information and analysis back to you all on the committee, as well as to engage with stakeholders about the program. You heard updates about that in July. We had detailed conversations with our consultants in September and October that really included a lot of feedback from cities throughout the region and some workshops that we did in partnership with Metro Cities as well this summer. And then just a couple of weeks ago on November 18th, our consultants presented their final report, which outlined just really a great documentation of the history of the LCA program and kind of what it has accomplished to date, what the key questions are that are on various folks' mind about the program right now, and some options for potential changes that we could incorporate moving forward to meet different objectives, including the objectives that are laid out in statute and in council policy for the program, and other objectives that council members and stakeholders have raised. So here we are today at the end of 2024. You just approved recommendations for our last two program funding rounds of TBRA and LHIA this year. So those were the concluding rounds of funding for LCA in 2024. That's something to celebrate. And now we're looking forward to 2025 and want to have a plan in place for making these resources available throughout the region. So our 2025 plan is that we can talk about this in kind of a high level tonight, hear from you what you want to know before we bring detailed scoring criteria and funding distribution recommendations to you in January, with the anticipation that you would vote on our fund distribution plan for 2025 for a recommendation on February 3rd. And just to kind of situate, again, the report that the consultants brought to us and the discussions that we all had with them, we wanted to bring back some of these identified tensions in the program that we're navigating over the long term, not necessarily just this month, this year, but over the next several years as we determine the goals and the strategies for this program moving forward. The tension between local priorities and regional, between wanting to be very flexible and open to funding many different project types to meet local needs, but also wanting to be targeted and have a sense of what we're trying to accomplish and a way to measure that. Flexible scoring, but also making it very clear how we will score projects, and encouraging broad geographic distribution through the region while also ensuring that we're really aligning with projects that meet regional policy goals.
So I'll give a preview of the changes that we're proposing for 2025. The first change that we're looking at is to lower the minimum score for pre-development. So currently the score to be eligible is 20 points out of an available 30 points. We're proposing lowering that to 15 points out of an available 30. And this will give more opportunity for projects to be funded, especially at projects that are at that earlier development stage. And the second and final change that we are previewing for you today is in the policy development program. We're proposing adding a criterion that would specifically prioritize cities that have lower net tax capacities. The policy program was designed with smaller cities in mind, and this new criterion would reflect that in the scoring. And so looking ahead to 2026, we are going to be spending 2025 continuing to work with city staff, developers, and council members to improve the LCA programs. Our primary areas of focus for 2025 are going to be outreach, alignment with Imagine 2050, and updating program designs and building in evaluation measures across all of our programs. And it's a really big priority for us to do this through an engaged process, which does take a little bit more time. So we are aiming to have final program changes approved in September of 2025, so that we can then focus on outreach and communications through the remainder of the year, the beginning of 2026, to ensure that staff and developers have all of the resources that they need to be successful in applying.
Yeah, so thank you, Hannah, for outlining that. So the minor changes that Hannah outlined are the main things that would really affect scoring for the program. We're looking at kind of some administrative tweaks, as always, to make it easier for applicants to physically, use the website to apply to the program. And if there's an opportunity to make, minor improvements like that, we'll do that as well. But want to make sure that we're all on the same page with you all, with the plan. So please let us know while we're here today. Do you need more information before we bring you the full fund distribution plan in January for discussion and then for a vote? And then as we look forward toward 2026 and any other changes that could be under consideration, what's the right pace for engaging with this committee throughout 2025?
Comments, questions? Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, thank you. With the scoring change, are we seeing that there's more projects that aren't scoring high enough, and or are cities and developers complaining that our scoring is too complex?
Chair, Councilmember Lee, it kind of depends on the program. So we have some programs that applicants have questions about. We get a lot of questions about our equity criteria of what are you prioritizing really, and how do we score points in this section. I would say a question that we get across all of our programs is like, what what is this program prioritizing, since we tend to have equal prioritization across a number of different categories. So I would say it's less that projects cannot score well enough, and more that applicants are unsure of which program they should apply to based on prioritization and how they can best situate themselves to be successful, because we're prioritizing many different things across our programs.
Oh, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Councilmember Carter.
Thank you.
I almost gave you a new last name.
Just looking at the update from the consultant's report, I'm recalling the comment that there were not enough funds. It appears that we are accommodating the fact that we also see that there are not enough applications for some of the other areas beyond core being funded. And so we are really accommodating that by the application of score points, recognizing the area, lower population, lower opportunity there to apply for these funds. So the balance may shift in coming years, in this coming year. And I would just ask that we be conscious and aware of the intentionality behind that. You know, all looking forward to seeing the encouragement of applicants, you know, who feel they'd have greater opportunity to succeed, and also to see that success. But also recognizing that given the funding is not sufficient, that we're going to see some shifting, and to account for what that shifting may be, intentional as it is, through deliberate conversations, recognizing what really may happen in that regard, and making certain that we're still able to recognize good applications wherever they may come from, albeit seeking the opportunity to see more of those succeed. Mm-hmm. So I'm just asking for real intentionality around this. I unfortunately wasn't able to be a part of that conversation, so I feel as though I'm coming in late with these comments, and I'm sure that those comments were made during the update. But I just ask for, you know, if the chair would also consent, that intentional attention to what we see as the changes, and to what we see as the opportunity to bring in more, but perhaps not be able to award other deserving applications.
Mm-hmm. If I could.
Yes.
Chair, Councilmember Carter, I very much appreciate that comment, and it's the way that we're approaching this program change process is going to be building in evaluation as we go, so that we're making sure that we're integrating evaluation metrics at as many points as we can, so that in the future we're making data-driven decisions, and we can look at whether or not we're having the intended impact that we want to be having, and really making those decisions with intent and with data standing behind those.
Eyes wide open.
Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There were some comments from the consultants that they got input from developers that they sometimes changed their plans to make them more expensive in order to better qualify for grants, or like the outreach stuff that is required in maybe a project that's not controversial would necessarily add some cost to getting a project in the ground. Are we working on how we can get good projects without creating additional costs? Because if you put in those additional costs and then you don't get the funding, then you're even worse off than if you had never applied to begin with.
Yeah, Chair, Councilmember Wolf, I think that's where our prioritization really comes into play. When we have clear priorities, we're able to tell applicants we're prioritizing senior housing, or we're prioritizing deeply affordable housing. And currently with the priorities that we have, if we're prioritizing affordable housing and environmental sustainability and connections and economic opportunity all equally. It's very hard for those projects that might be doing one thing really well to score well in our systems, and we might end up adding those costs. That's something that we've been hearing from developers for a long time. So I think as we go through this process and have conversations and can get more direction and prioritization, we'll be able to see where we can best fit in supporting the projects that we want to see come to fruition.
Councilmember Wolf?
So are we going to continue to do that for 2025, or is that put on the shelf for the 2026 funding?
That would be for 2026 funding. Yeah.
Councilmember Chambliss?
Thank you. I'm glad about the emphasis on outreach and as well as the emphasis on evaluation. I think that demonstrates transparency and it also demonstrates accountability, helps us to develop best practices in the work that we do. And frankly, evaluation has been a priority for me in 2024 and will continue to be a priority. I think it's going to make us a better organization.
Thanks.
Councilmember Lindstrom?
In terms of the right pace for engaging in 2025, part of the role of the consultants, I think, was to make sure that the program aligns with the regional development guide. So getting through that and then engaging shortly thereafter in the spring and maybe quarterly for these types of kind of check-ins. Seemed about right to me.
Any comment? Okay. Councilmember Wolf?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As far as the engagement, I think the most important thing is that it is authentic engagement. And we'll be able to tell by who they send to the meeting and how those meetings are conducted. Because I know with the meetings that we had in, where was it?
Columbia Heights.
Columbia Heights, seemed like half of the people there, it was their second week on the job, which tells me that cities didn't see that as a particularly important meeting because you're sending somebody who doesn't know what they're doing rather than, you know, some cities sent the community development director, but there were others that they literally said, I just started 2 weeks ago. And it's hard to get meaningful engagement with somebody who hasn't hardly, you know, they're just figuring out where their desk is and what the schedule is. So I think if we're engaging cities, that we need to do it over a period of time, because when I've done a lot of engagement for ES, and it usually takes 2 or 3 meetings with the same group of people before they even believe that you want their opinion. You know, a lot of people are afraid of us or figure that we're just looking to have a meeting for them to check the boxes to tell us that we're right. And we need to move beyond that to authentic engagement with cities if we're going to have any meaningful discussion. So it needs to be a series of meetings over time where you develop that trust that people believe that we really want what they have to say. Because some of the best engagement that we've had in ES has come from communities, like changing the SAC for businesses was an idea that came from a building official.
Yes, Sarah?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, Councilmember Wolf. I could respond a little bit. I think it's a good point that we need to make sure we get all the right people at the table. And I think we got some of the right people at the table at those meetings you referenced, but it's not the only engagement we've done or that we would intend to do, just so you know. Our team every year does an annual survey to all LCA program participants. We get a lot of good feedback on an annual basis that is often directly driving the changes you see each year in the fund distribution plan. And so that's one very specific method of engagement. And I think it will be important to talk with project leaders, developers in this process, as well as the city staff that work with this program. That's a piece that we didn't get a lot of engagement from in this most recent round of conversations. And then at the same time, to Councilmember Lindstrom's point about needing to incorporate the regional development guide policies, we have had deep engagement with communities in all forms, you know, city governments, counties, technical experts and community members throughout the region. And so we hope that, the policy priorities we put forward in those plans also help inform us here. So there's a lot of different opportunities for engagement that we will seek out and value your suggestions for as well.
Councilmember Wolf?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there was discussion about putting all of the LCA and TOD into one pool. That's not going to happen this year, right? That's being considered for next year, or is it not being considered?
Chair, Councilmember Wolf, we are having a single application for LCDA and TOD this year. I don't believe we're planning to pool the funds for LCDA and TOD this year, but it will be a single point application.
Councilmember Wolf?
And then there's talk of more funding for the home ownership. Where would that come from?
So
Sarah?
Chair and Councilmember Wolf, we don't have a fund distribution plan in its purest sense today, but it has been a goal of this body in the past to identify additional funding for that program. So it's kind of a question to you all if there is any flexibility in the distribution, whether we got the balance right or not. The council had equity funds available a couple of years ago that we did invest successfully into this program, and I don't know if that opportunity will be available again. And we had about $28 million last year total for all the programs, and there's none of it that's dedicated specifically to homeownership by statute, but we have been able to fund it at the level it's at now for the last several years. And so I would imagine that it will be a similar picture, but I don't have the details today.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Carter?
I find myself wanting to repeat this probably too often, more often than I need to, but rather say it than not, and that is that as we look at the fund distribution plan and we look at the potential of allocating funds to different purposes, it's always helpful to have some data and information about our challenge, what we are trying to achieve, how well we've done in the past, and what our challenges are upcoming. So whether we're talking about affordable housing, multifamily dwellings, or home ownership, they have their purposes. And with home ownership, of course, wealth creation is a part of that purpose. So I don't want us to get stuck in a space where we're thinking that we're comparing apples to apples when it's really eggs and oranges. And so I'd just like us to have some foundation there as we bring forward the distribution plan.
Yes.
Anything further? Thank you both, Sarah and Hannah, for this presentation, and we'll get lots more on January 21st. And then vote on February 3rd. Okay, more info to come. Thank you. Anything further this evening before we head home to watch football?
Pizza?
Can you tell I'm a little excited about this
What you're
game?
doing tonight.
Yeah, really. Boring. Nothing further? Well, then this meeting is adjourned.